Hello everyone, my name is Egor Zhogov, and this is my midterm project presentation prepared for the CIS 9467 class. My project is called New York City Dashboard, and the main purpose is to show a snapshot of areas like transportation, weather, and economic situation for the city of New York for the specific time period. Before we dive in, let me show you the preparation steps I've made for this project. Since the files that I was working with were very huge, I had to use the Power View function. Here, I have 4 data sets, where first one is my weather information, second tab is the MTA statistics, third tab is the data for 3 major stock market indexes, such as Dow Jones, S&P 500, and NASDAQ, and my last table is New York City open data, that gives us the information about road accidents and traffic conditions. I've used these datasets to create pivot tables, and let's take a look at the first one, which is the road accidents data. Here, I have information breakdown by year in each New York borough, and we can see that Brooklyn is by far the worst place to drive, as it has the most accidents, and in fact, even more than Manhattan and Staten Island combined. I've also applied conditional formatting for better visualization. Let's go to the next tab, which is the weather data. Here, I have average humidity, temperature, and wind speed. I also have applied conditional formatting to highlight the coldest and warmest months of the year. Down below, I have the second table, which shows the total count of precipitation, also breakdown by month and year. I've decided to make it separate for better visualization because of the difference in units. The next tab is MTA data, and this is by far my favorite part of the project. This table here shows how often the trains are on time for each line across multiple years. So if you ever were wondering if the train that you would take to work every morning and which is always late is the worst in the entire city, now you can actually see information for yourself. As we can see here, the S line is the most accurate train where it comes on time and 90% of the time, which is so much better than 4, 5, and 6 lines here, with the average arriving on time rankings is 7%. Now, let's go to the next tab, which is the MTA volume data. And this pivot table shows us the total amount of all passengers riding in the train systems and bus systems. We'll take a look deeper at this once we look at the dashboard chart, so let's just skip it for now. The final tab I have here is the financial indexes, which shows us the 3 major indexes breakdown by year and quarter. I've applied conditional formatting to see the trends and indicate weakest and strongest periods. As you can see here, for example, for the year 2011, quarter 4 was way weaker than quarter 1, and this is a very uncommon situation, so something must have happened. We should take a deeper look at that. Now let's go to the dashboard itself. The main challenge that I faced over the course of this project was that the data sets I've got were inconsistent and were missing key information. Because of that, I was not able to create relations across all charts with slicers, but I was able to find a different solution, such as macros. But before I get into that, let's take a look at the first chart, which is the train on time data. You can pick the line, year, and month, and see how often trains were on time. Let's take a look at the J line during 2009, during August month. As you can see, the train was on time at 85% of arrivals. Now let's compare that to the winter month, for example, January. We can see the percentage drop to be 83%. Also, I have recorded a macro here to reset all 3 of these filters. just so it's easier to use. Let's try this. As you can see, we're back to where we started. Now let's take a look at the next chart, which is the motor vehicle accidents by borough. As I mentioned before, we can do the drop down and break down by the city and borough and year, and we can compare each one to the other. As I already mentioned before, Brooklyn has the most accidents, where Queens is really far, not too far behind, and we can compare this data for year over year. Now let's take a look at this chart here, which is the number of passengers for each of the MTA's systems. As you can see, the total bus ridership has decreased significantly from 2009 to 2011, whereas the subway ridership numbers slowly but they steady increase, 2009, 2010 to 2011. Fine, let's go to the next section, which is the weather. You can see here, you can choose the month and year to see the average temperature, humidity, wind, and precipitation. For the ease of use, I've also created this macro here, which resets all filters. The chart on the right side shows us that April, if we choose actually select the data, you can see here that April is the most rained month of the year, whereas January and has the least amount. And we can click the reset, and it's all back to the start. Now let's take a look at the final section of the dashboard, which is economical snapshot. This chart shows us the NASDAQ, S&P 500, and Dow Jones, and changes in those indexes over the time period. I've decided to use the timeline tool just so it's easy to choose the time frame needed. As you can see, I can choose specific quarter I want and compare the data to each other and month over month. Now let's quickly go back to the beginning. As I mentioned before, I couldn't tie this slicer to every chart, but I've been able to go around it by creating these macros here. This way, dashboard can deliver its main function, such as showing the situation in the city from 3 different angles for a specific month and year. You can click on any year here and see that it will apply a filter to every single chart. Let's try doing this by clicking on 2009. As you can see, it has been applied to every chart we have here. Now, I also create this button here, which is reset all filters. If you click on that, it'll reset every single filter applied on this dashboard. As you can see, we're all back to where we started. Now let's just try this again by clicking 2011. It has been applied to every chart I have here. And once you got the 2011 data, you can actually start drilling down, if you would like, by going to specific months over the different charts. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening and have a good evening.